All right, y'all. Well, let's get going. What meeting number is this?
This would be, what reading number is this? 3 or 4?
Reed, did you want to say something?
Yeah, it's number 4.
Number 4.
I'm from the top.
Great, thanks. Oh, right, because we did all of the Octavia Butler Xenogenesis trilogy, right?
Yeah, wait, it actually might be 5 for you and me, Lawrence. But anyway,
yeah,
we're on a great run.
Well, yeah, this is Black Sci-Fi Book Club meeting number 4/5, and we are discussing N.K. Jameson's The Fifth Season. Bernadette has her copy. I went to find my copy today and I can't find it. I think I gave it away to somebody. I'm upset about it.
That's very you.
Wow, that is very me. Totally cold.
You're like, this is great. Here, you must read it now.
You should read it. Yeah. Okay, so maybe that's a good way to start. So people can say intro, just introduce yourself, maybe say where you are, and then what is a thing that is not uniquely you, but like, what's a thing that's definitely you? That's sort of that you feel good about, or that you feel proud about, or maybe that other people would identify in you. And maybe I'll go first, and Bernadette has already given me my answer. My name is Lawrence. I am here from Boston. And one thing that is uniquely me is I think I love sharing things with people. And I especially love sharing things that I love with people. So yeah, I've already given away my copy of this book and gave it away so hard I can't remember who has it. Yeah, but I give away like resources and ideas and money and food. I had the first meeting of my 6-month men's group last night, and I made 2 loaves of sourdough bread, and that felt really good. Yeah, so that's me. I think it was pretty great. And I'll pass to Bernadette.
Hi, everyone. Sorry to be the annoying one who's both on video and dialed in, but I don't trust the Wi-Fi out here in the middle of nowhere, Alabama. So I'm Bernadette, she, her, they, them. And I am usually in Seattle coming from y'all, but I am here in Alabama with a work group. I work for a nonprofit organization that does educational equity work, in particular racial educational equity work, and we are at the Legacy Museum and the National Peace and Justice Memorial. Short plug, everyone should come. And something uniquely me, I think, is, or not, I don't know that it's unique, but it's something that's super important to me and something that grounds me, is that wherever I go, I travel a lot. I always have like a traveling altar space that I set up, and there are some things that are standalone, like they always come with me, from my trusty tarot deck to different anointing oils, but there's something deeply powerful about like connecting to the land of wherever I'm at and being able to like incorporate that into the altar that I bring, that has mementos from my mom, my grandma. It's just realizing right now, very femme-based ancestor, but just being really connected to ancestor, and particularly important to me this week because my family on my mom's side is from Alabama, and so just feeling really connected to home right now in a very loving way. I'll pass to Mustafa.
My name is Mustafa. I'm coming to you from Seattle, Washington. I work in the same organization that Bernadette works in. I'm having a hard time coming up with something that is uniquely me, but if I had to say something that is uniquely me would be.
It doesn't have to be uniquely you. It just has to be like other people would see it and they would be like, oh yeah, that's definitely Mustafa.
Oh, I am extremely particular about washing my hands. I wash my hands like 45 times a day. That is, if that's one thing that comes to mind.
45?
That's like a huge exaggeration, but
Okay.
I don't like my hands to ever feel like sticky. They have to be constantly dry. They have to be, I don't know. It's just like, I'm very particular about having clean hands or being like people touching me with unclean hands or any hands period like that.
I learned something new about you. I'm not in the office.
No, I feel like
ever observed that.
I feel like I'm out here revealing a whole lot to a new group of people.
Yes. That's what I'm talking about.
You got you.
I'll go. This is Reed. I live in New York, and something recently that I'm learning that's uniquely me is that I am both like incredibly cautious, but also willing to like take risks and do like like I don't like do risky things if I feel well prepared for it. So I just like went surfing, for example, for the first time ever. But I'm also like terrified of water and like sharks and like sand, like undertows and all of that. But I felt very prepared, so I did it. So I think that's like something that's kind of contradictory that is uniquely me.
Cool, Reed.
That's wild. You went surfing and you're afraid of sharks. And
yeah, and it's like the ocean
women,
in
did you
general.
say?
Oh, it's in outside of Boston. There's like surfing places outside of Boston.
That was very impressive. Okay, well, the 5th season. Thoughts?
Okay, I have a question for folks who had not read it before, but was there a point in time where in the book you realized before it was revealed that all of the characters are the same person?
Wait, can you ask that one more time? I think I got it. I just want to make sure I'm going to answer it.
Yeah, was there a point in time before it was revealed in the text that you kind of realized or started to have a feeling that all of the characters were the same person, the 3 main characters, the 3 different stories were actually the same person?
I won't say that it's that's a really great question that I'm like, at what point did I realize it? Because I think it was at the point that it was revealed that I was like, oh, okay, now it clicks for me. But like leading up to it, I felt like I had so I think it's because like usually when I read, I'm just like, especially for pleasure, I'm just reading through it. I'm like, that's an interesting connection. Okay, I'll just let it slide kind of thing. But then there was a point, so I finished a week ago. Yeah, it was before it was revealed that I finally pulled out a piece of paper and I was like, okay, I need to like map out what's happening across where kind of space. And then I was like, wow, this is all coming full circle, but I don't think I made the actual like, oh, that's why until I was like, oh, okay, that's why. That makes total sense. That wasn't surprising, but it was not something that I was like, oh, okay, that's the only way it could have been this.
Yeah, I think I realized. Well, Reed, I'm curious what you mean when you say when it was revealed in the text. Because, like, I remember when I remember, or when I realized, and I can't remember. Yeah, I feel like N.K. Jameson, like, I feel like she reveals it in a couple of ways, kind of to Bernadette's point, like, in really subtle ways that if you were really paying attention, you would get. So, Reed, I'm curious, like, what's the moment that you're talking about? So I can see if I was before or after it.
Yeah, I can't remember the exact moment for each of the 3 timelines, but I think the one when she's youngest, I can't remember the different names now, when she's the youngest versus when she's on the mission with Alabaster. Like those 2 periods, like I think those are the 2 periods that collapse first, where you first realize that I think her name was Tonight is Damia. But it happens a little bit towards the end of the book. But I guess, so, and I was thinking like way too detailed really quick, but because this was my like second time reading it, I realized just like how much it's hinted at throughout the entire length of the book, that all these characters are the same. Like she has this pain in her hand. Like the character has pain in her hand, and whenever she sees one of the guardians, that like pain always like tingles, and that like connects to originally when she first met her guardian, and her guardian broke her hand. When she's an adult and she's like thinks about guardians, or she like thinks about like the color maroon, or, like a guardian's cape, like.
Yeah, I definitely didn't notice any of those things. I for sure noticed. Yeah, it was pretty late. I do think it was those 2 stories that collapsed for me first. Particularly when they were out on the island. I think it was Cyanide when they were out on the island and like having the kid. There was like something that gave it away there. And then like, you know, when they met on the road and they I forget which, I think that was Essen and the like wealthy, like upper class brat who would become this like old, like curmudgeonly sort of like, I don't know, I just imagine like a burly, like, you know, dirty, just like covered in dirt character who was the person who she met back in training. I think that was maybe the explicit moment where it's revealed, but I realized a little before that. Mustafa, what about you, knowing that this is your second time through?
So, I mean, I read the book like a few years back. So, I mean, I'm not coming into it the most fresh, but I would say for me, it's like, I don't think I made that connection at that time, really. When I was originally reading the story, I was under the impression, I'm like, there is a way that all 3 of these characters are gonna like, they have to intersect in some way. Like, do they meet do they meet at some point during the story or something like that? That's like what that was my original like guiding thought. And then I would say for me it was, I honestly didn't find out until Demaya was choosing her name after she got her first ring at the Fulcrum. And I was like, if that's the case for Demaya and Cyanide, then it must be the same thing for Essen.
Yeah, and I'll say that was a pretty, like, that was the connection point for me too. But again, not so much in the like, okay, so they must be the same individual, but like from a space of like, there's so much community laced throughout the book that I was just of this space of like, it's kind of hard to explain, but like I think of my daughter who was adopted, and my grandmother and my mom, who she's named for, and that like there's this space where it almost feels like when my mom was alive, she would often say that my daughter was just like me as a child, right? But obviously we're two very different people, but the more and more I would sit with that, the more I'd be like, you have the same mannerisms as me. People are often like, she looks just like you. And again, it's obvious to me we're two different people, but I think on a soul journey kind of space, we are, all four of us are like one person, just generationally time traveling, so to speak. And so at one point I was just like, what is going to be the unique twist that it's like these people could exist at like different times and still have like some otherworldly kind of connection to each other. Yeah, so that's when I got to mapping people, and I was like, what's happening here? And overanalyzing.
I love that you analyzed that hard. Do you have your map?
Not with me. I was looking for it in my book, and I was just like, must be at home. But
yeah, I would love to see that at some point. Or maybe can you share some more about it?
Yeah, I think it started for me from this space of, and often when especially like in the reading of trilogies and stuff like that, I'm always like, okay, as I read, and I read in fits and starts, right? So I'll have a week at work where I have a ton of time and I can read, and then it'll be weeks before I can get back into a book. And so it was getting a little frustrating to be like, okay, I need to like go back and read a whole chapter or two, if not more, because I can't keep straight like what kind of people are doing what, and does it even matter like that you have a particular role in your community, or that you're part of a particular community, or you're from this place versus that place. And so a lot of it is quite frankly just a way to like actively engage my mind in reading what I'm actually reading, as opposed to like wandering into all sorts of other things that need to get done at the same time. So it's mapping names and then being like, okay, who else is similar to this person, often in like role, or in this particular book, for instance, in like role, community, are they organic, right? All that kind of stuff that I was just like, okay, so what are the connections between individual people, between communities, between places, and being able to, often I do it in pen, but being able to scratch it out and then come back and be like, oh, that's connected to this other thing in a completely different way than I thought it was. And that's always really fun. So it's pretty messy. And people would look at it and be like, this is a map to where? But it's a way for me to just like get out of my head, and getting stuck in one, particularly in a book like this, getting stuck in one storyline and then missing really significant things that are happening in another storyline because I'm still over processing what was happening over here.
I just think that sounds awesome. There were several moments where I wanted to do something like that and I just didn't.
Why not?
That's a great question. I don't know, but hearing you say it, now I'm like, okay, next time I feel that impetus, I'm just going to do it. I think I thought it was too late. Like by the time I like had that thought the third time, I was like, it's too late. I'll just figure it out. Okay, so Reed, you asked this question, and I'm curious why you asked that question. And I also really want to lay into this thing that Bernadette, you were talking about, was this like multi-generational soul travel thing. Just because I have been thinking a lot lately about, I think a lot about stories and narrative and how different systems and like how systems reproduce patterns, and also how people in families relate to each other across time and space. Okay, but before we go there, or before we continue to go there, Reed, I'm curious, why did you ask that question?
Yeah, to me, it was mostly like who the character is, and those three different periods of her life are just so radically different. I think it's very similar to what Bernadette was saying. It's just like what holds them together, what are the similarities, and like what experiences in each part of her life are so formative, so they can see it then in another part of her life, even if she is a very different person. Yeah, I mean, I think this is like clear kind of experiences of trauma she experienced that just really connect her basically 2 or 3 moments in life. Yeah, trauma that happened to her, happened to her kids. Yeah, I'll stop there.
I'm muted. So it sounds like trauma is the link between them. That's what you're seeing, Reed?
Yeah. Sorry, I'm gonna keep myself on mute because it's really loud.
Okay. Appreciate your transparency. So Bernadette, wondering, maybe can you say some more about this? I mean, you talked about, this, like, you feel like you said 4 of you who are like the same soul, but maybe across generations.
Right.
So like, I don't know, what is that? Where is that? How do you make sense of that?
Yeah, it's kind of like making the connections between the storylines is it's more muted, and it's not like a obvious moment of like y'all are connected kind of thing, right? There are these little nuances along the way, and listening to Reed talk about like the characters being connected through trauma, right? I was also thinking about the 3 of them and like the ordinariness of their like everyday lives that is certainly cast within this space of family and belonging or not belonging, and how their story of being part of something or searching for being part of something is so key to that. And it definitely makes me think of my grandmother, my mom, myself, and my daughter in this space that my grandmother was from Alabama, but through military, etc., ended up in El Paso, Texas, made a home for herself there, but always seemed to be like on a journey searching for home, for lack of a better word. And I know I'm on that journey myself. I can imagine that, especially telling interweaving storylines, my daughter, who's adopted, is going to find herself on that journey at some point where she's like, I love y'all. You've done great. Hopefully we've done great for her. But she's also going to want to know, like, where is home for my soul? And so much of this book is about journeying, like getting to somewhere to do something. And it's not just the physical journey, it's also that space of like, my soul has been here before, even if it's certainly in the like younger version that's like, okay, well, those who came before me like had experiences that I'm reliving again, because they're not settled yet. But even in the older experiences, there's this like knowledge and knowing of like, I'm part of something bigger, that maybe other people don't quite yet get like the usefulness of, but like I'm part of something bigger, and I'm on a journey to like progress my line so that it's kind of this absence of time space even, right? So like even for the older folks who know that their time is like coming to an end and there will be others who come after them, they're still foreseeing and foreshadowing that like progressing their journey matters to who's coming next to getting to a bigger storyline. So that's a lot of like way non-concrete way of saying like there's this knowing between each of those. In this book, I don't know that I necessarily captured it as like generational differences, but definitely different points in time in the life. That and I think of it as like I thought of it as reading like I'm always curious like what is a lifetime in all the books we're reading? Is it 10 years? Is it 1,000 years kind of space? And so getting unhooked from time as we think of it and really and coming full circle to like these are all the same people, like really wondering if it's the same people in the same way I think of like me and my daughter are same soul, or is it same people in the way that like this is one person who like we're just catching different parts of her story at different parts on the timeline. So and all that, both of those are very soul connected to me. Sorry.
No, you're good. I feel, yeah, that just resonates a ton with me. You know, I don't know if folks have read Of Water in the Spirit, or Of Water and Spirit. Of Water and Spirit by Malidoma Patrice Somé, and it's about he's like a young, oh my gosh, where did he? I want to say he was born in Nigeria. I'm gonna look it up real quick. Anyways, he was like sort of stolen. He was stolen by missionaries, like Christian missionaries, away from his home, and like grew up in a church, like grew up in like a monastery, and then literally ran away and walked back like miles to his home village, and then became an initiated elder, and now lives in the U.S. Burkina Faso, that's where he's from. And one of the things that his tradition, the Dagara people, talk about is the way that like souls come into and out of bodies, and how like the soul is the thing that is consistent and the body is the thing that is temporary. And I also am in community with people who believe in reincarnation. So that's like another way that I feel like to talk and think about this. And then, for me personally, this feels like if I look at my own life in this way, I could totally read my life in exactly the same way that Jameson structured this book. Like if I looked at the first 7 years of my life and the last seven, like the most recent 7 years of my life, you might not believe that it's the same person. Like you could just be totally, and I think what a couple of folks have said, like there's these patterns, or Reed, talked about the trauma and how the trauma from youth shows up in the adult life. Like I could definitely imagine that, or not imagine, I can see those things. And I'm doing some healing work right now to make sure that I'm not dangerously impacted by those traumas, or like I'm not diminishing my ability to do the work I need to do with those. But I just feel, when I started to see all of that, I was like, whoa, this is so brilliant. Like, this is so brilliant.
Yeah.
Mustafa, I'm wondering how you are thinking about this or relating to this, or is this just like not in your interest set and you want to talk about something else?
For me, I want to know. I just A.K. Jameson was able to like do it so masterfully in terms of telling like a full story in like 3 separate pieces. Whereas I've seen other books really like belabor like inserting a person's past and really inserting their mindset, but it was like a different type of way for me to understand a character. And I haven't really seen too many books do it in this way. So I was just appreciative of like just her writing style in that aspect. But in terms of like relating to myself, I don't think I've really made that like intergenerational connection. that multi-generational connection that Bernadette has. So it's probably something I just have to think through for now.
Yeah, Bernadette, did that come because the older people said that to you, or did you notice that?
That's a really great question, right? Like, I think that there's definitely a lot of confirmation bias in my life. Like, you don't notice the thing and it's the thing. And so I noticed before the people that were related to me were saying, oh my goodness, your daughter does XYZ like you, that there was definitely a peace and calm that I would often feel around her of like, and like, so going in to adopting my first child, I was like, I am not the mothering type. Like, I don't need to be around babies. You should probably get your children so that I don't hurt them or influence them in any kind of way they shouldn't be influenced, kind of thing. And so going into adopting Julia, I was very much apprehensive that I was like, I don't know that we're going to be able to bond, or like, what is she really going to be like part of me? And the moment that I saw her and laid eyes on her, I was just, I can't describe it as anything other than spiritual in terms of like, wow, like we were through all the drama of everything that's coming together, like our storylines are meant to intersect. And pretty immediately on, people, I mean, a newborn child, but like people a week and so in were already saying things to me outside my family like, oh my goodness, she's like, so you're mini you, and she's like the spitting image of you. And I'm like, great, I look like a little newborn? Great. But I got what they were saying. It wasn't so much her physical features, but it was very much her mannerisms and like how she acted. And as a person who went to college to study genetics and was forever fascinated with like nature or nurture conversations, right? Like I was like, how much of this is like I'm the one that's mothering her? So of course all these like characteristics are getting imbued on her. But then when my family met her and they started putting in my mind certainly things around like her mannerisms and showing me pictures of what I looked like with my mom that mirrored so much pictures that looked like me with Julia, I was just like, ooh, somebody's trying to channel something right here, because
wow,
this is crazy. And I think it probably started well before Julia was ever a thought in her first mother's mind, in that we had struggled to have kids. And I remember at one point, we knew we were always going to adopt, but we thought we would also have biological children as well. But at the point that we were in transition between like, okay, let's move on to adoption first instead, which is adoption only for us at this point. We had a child that we were expecting that I always knew that I wanted to name any potential daughter that I might have after my grandmother. My mom happened to pass away or was diagnosed with cancer. We knew she was going to pass at the time that Julia came into our life. So Julia became Julia for my grandmother, Michelle for my mom and her middle name, and Joyce for another woman we know. But more and more, I think, again, kind of unhooked from time, like there was a meaning to the, like, not this child, but this child will be named this. And ever since that, to the point of like confirmation bias, I've definitely been like, ooh, now this picture looks just like that too. And almost intentionally recreating spaces too. But we'll see as time continues to progress much more significantly and Julia develops into their own whole being and who they turn out to be, like how little of that has to do with me, myself, and more about like what her storyline is supposed to be. But one thing in the book that really stood out to me in the context of like my own story was this, I mentioned it a little bit earlier, but like this space of longing for home and longing for being a part of a community that and the journeying to get to community, especially being othered or different, and being certainly present and useful in a community, but always having like the hushed undertones kind of going on, and the people talking about you kind of like, something about you is different, and I'm not sure, but now that I know what's different, I'm scared of you and need to push you out kind of space that particularly Raina and even in the space of like being able to protect the community, but also having the power to completely destroy it through the story narrative that you want to tell about what they're capable of doing, is something that I'm still sitting with myself of like, how does our narrative and our story shape whether something is powerful and useful or whether something is like destructive and needs to be avoided, shaped in a different way.
I have lots of thoughts about that, but I want to know what do you think about that first?
I'll let you go first so I can think a little bit more.
Okay. Well, I definitely think that Jameson plays that balance really interestingly, really well, because I think that just is reality. Like I know she gets talked up about her world building capacities, of which she has the most, like no question. And there's an interview that she gave with Ezra Klein, and she does a world building exercise in the interview. It's fascinating. You should definitely check it out if you haven't. And one of the things she says is that to build a successful fantasy world, or no, she says okay, I might screw this up. I think she's talking about sci-fi. So the difference between sci-fi and fantasy is that science fiction is actually grounded in science. Like your readers have to be able to latch on to enough of what you're talking about to understand it without you over explaining it. And fantasy is like totally unhinged. Like everything can be different. And she says, you build a world, and then you mostly build a world that relates to the world that your readers are in, and then you like change one or two things that are really critical. So, in this book, it was like some people have the ability to control the earth. And so, I respect her infinitely for that. And I feel like one of the things that she didn't change, even though it looked like it was changed, was exactly what you're saying. Is like, there are people have abilities that in reality could be seen as extremely dangerous and worthy of being shunned, and also are able to like save thousands of people at once, like in a very short amount of time with an intense amount of focus. Like one person can save lots of people at once. I think about music. Like when I think about how many musicians, like how many people have said about a particular musician, like, oh yeah, that song saved my life, or that music saved my life. Like thousands of people at once could be saved by an artist putting, 3.5 minutes of energy in. I mean, obviously it's more than that to make a track, but like, and I, on another side, like, obviously I think about, like music as a part of cultural work. And like, I feel like Blackness as a constructed identity, Black music has saved so many people, Black people and non-Black people. And yet our culture at large views Blackness as incredibly dangerous and like worthy of shunning, othering, destroying. And we live in this world where there's like this fucking funny, like, we love Beyonce, police shoot black people with impunity.
Sure. Ooh, you said some words. Oh man, you said some words. It makes me think of other people have been bringing this up, particularly because we're in Alabama and we're very intentionally centering Blackness and a particular kind of Blackness in our experience here. And a couple of folks have brought up in multiple lead ups to this, the space, the notion of like, people love Black culture, just not Black people. And as I read the book, I'm like, yeah, people love being saved and having like tremendous earth energy go around them. But at the exact same time, they're like, that happened because one of them is here and we need to snuff that person out, kind of thing. And like in everyday life, I'm like, how can you love like the music, the hair, the like who's champions and who's on the floor playing basketball to become champions, and all, just how can you love all of those artifacts and those benefits to you, but like be so afraid of or despise the people so much? And that was definitely a through line as I was reading the book, of like the outsiderness. And certainly I think there are through lines between like the fear of like, if you can't control it, in the book, if you can't control your powers, then yeah, you certainly have the power to be destructive. And there, go out on a limb here and say that there could be legit reasons to be like, oh my goodness, I should be afraid that like either you can't control it or you can control it and you've been treated so poorly that you might be vindictive with it or retaliatory with it. And it makes me think a lot of like the Black experience, where a lot of, to me, it feels like a lot of the restrictions on power and the like keeping Black folks themselves kind of cowed and out of visibility is around this fear of, well, if we give you power, like, what are you going to do in retaliation or in vindication of what we've done before? Like, yeah, we've talked a lot about white supremacy and white supremacy in particular while here in Alabama, and how centering whiteness really leaves us in a space where we're doing lots of stuff in service, particularly educated Black folks or Black folks who have something of value to the white supremacist structure, that like it's all about working and working and working Black folks to the bone to get that thing of value so that they have nothing left to give back to their own community. So looking at the storyline here in this book, I'm just like, why don't they just, like, there's so much focus on like community as a thing in this book, and even in the realization that like they are all the same person, like there comes a point where I'm just like, why don't you just hole away in your own space and create your own space for your own people and let the rest of the folks like suffer through all the seasons and die off, kind of thing. Like, why are you continually, even though you're shunned in the community, continue to try to be of service to it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, for me, it kind of makes me like something that comes to mind for me is can you guys hear me?
Yep, you're echoing a little bit.
Okay.
But I'm not sure where it's coming from.
Okay,
I'm gonna mute myself just in case.
Okay. Yeah, no, it just makes me think about like when you were mentioning like the power of musicians and so forth. It's making me think about that Colin Kaepernick example of like the parallel it kind of brings up for me and Essoon, and how when they, what like role they initially viewed Colin Kaepernick in as just an athlete, as a football player, and then when he presented himself in a different way that may have always existed, but now it was more visible, how threatening that power appeared to people that were in control.
Yep.
Yeah, and now he is a Nike, a face of Nike, which I feel like is a funny it's like a funny in and out, or like, yeah, there's like a trajectory, or like I don't know, I'm trying to say like an up and down wave. Like first he was nobody, then he skyrocketed to like a lot of popularity, or not popularity, but like a lot of knownness. And then the backlash came. And then I feel like at the bottom of the backlash is when Nike picked him up. I don't know where he is now, but just thinking about the origins and like them sort of getting picked up or like absorbed into the structure of empire.
Yep, I was following you there. I was following.
Oh no!
Like a lot of the debate with Colin, right, is in this space of people seeing his role so narrowly, right? Mustafa, to your point about like he always was, in my mind, like someone who cared about like the issues in the community. So it wasn't like he just woke up one day and was like, oh, I know, let me go ruin my career by like doing this thing. And because it was outside of the narrative people had for him, certainly the backlash came and everything, but then to the point of becoming the Nike kind of face of Nike and the backlash subsiding a bit, it is about exactly that, like the reabsorption into the empire and the like, okay, you may not fit exactly the narrative that we had for you before, but we're going to find, again, a way to like overuse your talents and quite frankly, suck you dry. And people often look at me crazy when I say stuff like that because they're like, Colin's getting paid a lot and, you know, it ain't the end of the world. And I'm like, everything ain't about money, right? Like, let's unhook from capitalism first and foremost. But when you unhook from that, like that reabsorption into this very capitalistic, Nike sells shoes. Nike is not like, it can be, but it's like not this movement building space. They sell shoes and get to say really wild shit because they have a lot of power. And that space, I think, gets lost a lot in that there's this constant reckoning and restructuring of power in a way that's like outside of the norm of what we think for an individual athlete like a Colin or a LeBron James, for instance. But that still keeps them close to like our very narrow definitions of who they should be. Nike is still about athletic apparel. You are still an athlete. Which I think highly of athletes, but a lot of our society doesn't. They're like, okay, just go play on the field and call it good. They very much emphasize the word play.
Yeah, and I also feel like, you know, Bernadette, to one of the things you were saying about how people justify, it seems like they justify their own view of the system, which is like, oh, well, Colin's making a lot of money, so it's fine. But it's like, if you don't know, like the Nike team, the Nike people that hired, or that, you know, that made him the face of their company, like, sure, Colin's making a lot of money, but like, how much money do you think those folks are making? Like, it's a very calculated decision to have Colin Kaepernick be the face of that corporation, or to be a face of that corporation. Like, yeah, he's making millions of dollars from, you know, a sports franchise and then probably Nike on top of that. But like, those people are making so much money.
Right.
And to justify his action by saying he's making a lot of money, I think it's just really, I don't want to say narrow-minded, because I feel like we're not educated about systems in that way. So it's not about being narrow-minded in my perspective. It's just like, I don't know what it is. I don't know how to describe it, but it's just like a lack of full system awareness, which I think is.
I was gonna say it's very narrative based, because like even in the story where they're talking about I forget what they're referred to as, but like all the different like asides about like the tablets and the verses and everything that are telling them like this time is coming, like y'all should know that we've been here before, we know what's coming. It's almost, it's not so much a narrow-minded space, but it's like this is what we've been taught, this is what we've been educated to know, and until we know or come across something different, we're not going to know different. And so being really immersed in a very capitalist space right now, like most of us only know the space of like, okay, your buying power is your power kind of space. How many dollars you have is the measure of your worth, and haven't been exposed to any other way of measuring worth and value, particularly from a US-centric kind of culture space that doesn't allow people to think of things of like political capital as actual capital and power, as of things like your freedom being a measure of your value, your ability to fully participate in a community, right? Like America is so great at talking about like all these constitutional rights we have and these freedoms we have, but not very quick to reconcile that so many people don't get to partake fully in any of those rights. And particularly the darker you are, the less likely you are to get to participate fully in those rights and privileges that are lore for a lot of folks who like, this is all I know and this is all I've experienced, but until they come across someone who doesn't experience them in the same way, it becomes this, it's hard to process for a lot of people that they're like, well, yes, I believe in freedom of speech, for instance, but not for Colin, not for athletes, and not necessarily for, well, certainly for Colin, but like, and for LeBron, but like, not for athletes, y'all should stay in your lane kind of thing, and not even making the connection to most of the people you're saying not for you are the people in our society that you've often tossed aside and said, yeah, you're not worthy of being a full citizen. Basically Black folks.
Yeah, Black people. And other folks of color and women, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But definitely especially Black folks.
Right. And again, I think that so much comes from this space. It's been really interesting for me because on our trip, we've talked a lot about, especially coming to the lynching memorial, we've been really intentional about like, what is Black joy? Like helping people to see that, yes, you're going to experience a narrative that is very much around trauma and pain and suffering, and maybe even awe for me of like, oh my goodness, Black Americans still actually exist after all of this like very constructed approach to trying to like bleed folks dry of their value and then discard them. But in that, there's just so much joy and power that is inherent in the community if you flip the narrative and think differently about it. And so thinking through the origins and the space that like on any given day, people could be looking at them as like saviors of the world. But more times than not, they're looking at them as like, oh my goodness, your power. I'm scared of your power. I don't have your power. I'm scared that you have your power. I'm scared that you won't do the things with your power that I think you should do with them. And so I should make sure that you're contained and subsumed into our society in a way that makes sure we can keep a check on that.
It's basically like, I'm able to tolerate your power if it's under state control.
Amen. Amen. Quite literally. And then not even realizing that under state control, right? Like, why do you trust the state? Like, does the state really have your best interests at heart? Like, that corrupting influence of power, and how in every end time, in every end game, you have to start making choices. And why do you believe that the state is going to put your needs ahead of someone else's needs when they often never have before? So like I don't want to get too political, but it's the whole like current situation where people vote for candidates that I'm like, that dude ain't looking out for your interests in any sort of way. Like, it's completely about exploiting you, but you believe a narrative you've been told about, like, anyone can pull themselves up from their bootstraps and become a millionaire, billionaire in this country. And because you think that someday, whatever days from now, you're going to be that person, you start following this person who has none of your interests at heart and is exploiting you, like literally exploiting you. But you can't see that for the glimmer and hope of what one day you may hopefully be able to do to other people. So yeah, I'm a bit on a tangent with my why do you trust the state? But
I don't know.
I mean,
you can go, Mustafa.
No, you go ahead.
I'm done. I was just saying that's a great tangent.
Yeah, okay. What is it? No, I definitely did. Like, I didn't even feel like it was much of a tangent. Just thinking about what is it? I forget the name of like the ruling class. What is it? The ruling class in terms of like when they find out that what is it? Alabaster and cyanide are able to control the obelisk. And they want to send out the guardians to make sure that this doesn't go any further than that, and they're not finding out anymore. And like the idea of state control and how it might kind of makes me think about painting enemies, right? It's like they're making it appear that the origins are the true enemies of the people, where the state itself is doing many perverse things.
I feel like I'm talking a lot, but I do want to interject in that space, especially when you use the word enemy, just because as people are walking through this lynching memorial, there's all sorts of different emotions that come up for people. And of course, anger and like, how can you do this to people is a thing that comes up. And folks are processing through like, you can't do this to a human, to someone that is a human to you. So there's the dehumanizing nature of it. But then also the space of like, a couple of people pointing out, they wouldn't even treat animals this way, right? Like they wouldn't even treat their dogs this way. And then I was pointing out that like, even in the narrative we've told ourselves around enslaved people being property, right? Like you wouldn't even treat your property this way because like you made an investment in your property. So you don't want to like have to keep making repairs and all sorts of other things. And one of our colleagues brought up that the only thing that you treat this way is an enemy. Is someone that you're like, I need to make that entity the enemy. That is the like common rallying thing that our people can be against and unite against in the absence of having something really powerful and positive to unify around. And in that enemy making space, it helps to mute the like very egregious things that the state is doing to enrich itself over the people that it's supposed to govern, because you're too distracted by the enemy that they've created for you to like be focused on. So yeah, that space of oh my goodness, the origins are the enemy and y'all need to focus over there while we come and suck all the resources dry and prep for the next season and making sure that we survive. Hopefully the seasons that are amongst us is a super, we were saying in our group here that like the rule book, the playbook on oppression is never rewritten. It's not even edited. It's like just constantly relived upon different groups of people throughout time. And this book certainly, I was like, I love sci-fi, to your point earlier, Lawrence, of like, it's so real and it's based in a a reality that that has some major tweaks to it. And I'm usually loving it, particularly by Black women authors, just from the space of like and then what? After we've like, I was going to say a word, after we've messed everything up, and then what kind of space. And so I definitely am looking forward to the next two books, because right now I'm in a space of like, I need more. I need to, and then what, to be like next level. Like, break us out of the paradigm.
For real.
Yeah, I'm really excited for what is coming next. What did you say, Brenda? I missed it.
I said, don't tell me the next part, Mustafa.
No, I'm gonna reread the book because I don't remember it like that myself, but I'm gonna reread it.
Yeah. The ruling class I looked up is called the, I don't know how to say it, the Sanzed.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Sanzed. So I feel like there's so many things to discuss in this book. One thing, I mean, we don't have to talk about this a ton, but as a queer person, I like freaking love the Alabaster. It's like this queer, like tortured, closeted, but also beautiful, and like such a caring parent character. Like, I was so happy about that. And it gave me just like, I felt really, I was like really sad. I mean, I was like sad when it was very clear that he was like being forced into having sex. Because that was the angle I first saw it from. And then I saw it from, I guess at that point it was cyanide. Because it seemed like she was like so clear-headed about what she was there to do that I didn't see her as a victim as early. And maybe because I read patterns of queerness in him. Just like, living alone at the top floor of a building in this like what should be an extravagant reality, but actually he's just like drinking himself into a like nightmare. Just like I've seen those stories. I've seen that.
You're like, this seems familiar. What's happening?
Game recognized game, and looking real familiar.
That penthouse vantage point.
Yeah, and it's like often compensating. It's like the cover, like a deep lack. And I guess the last thing I wanted to say about that, I'm curious what you all think about that, or if you want to go in other directions. But like as I had a long-term partner for about 6 years, and now I am in a relationship with many friends who have kids. But like as a queer person, particularly as a queer man who cannot, deliver a child, like there are just like lots of conversations and questions about like what would it mean to be a father, or what does it mean to be a father, and I think I just really appreciated the way Jameson sort of wove that wove that difficult reality into the story. Obviously it's not clean. I do feel like, Cyanide and Alabaster were both victims of like systemic sexual assault. And, he got to be a father in a way that it was very clear that he loved being a father. Or it seemed to me like he loved being a father. I don't know how y'all read it.
I'm going to pause and give Mustafa space to respond first.
I did. For me, I did appreciate how they were able to like build out Alabaster as like this very complex character who had a very, in the beginning, like I didn't fully understand Alabaster. I was like, he seemed like such a confusing character for me. And then at the end, when him and Cyanite's relationship was growing, and I was able to like tap into his frustrations, and then later on when they were having a relationship, I think it was like 3 of them, and I was just taking that in and just trying to understand all that's involved in that.
I think for me, it was that like breaking free of binaries in so many different ways, right? Like breaking out of this space where so many choices get presented as you take path A or you take path B, and there are no other options in there. And back to Reed's kind of original premise of like the connection of the storylines between trauma. I love, Lawrence, that you really explicitly call out like state-sponsored sexual assault. That was like the thing that brought them together. And recognizing that out of that trauma, binary narratives got busted in ways that were like, okay, so as I definitely read Alabaster as queer and also as loving being a father as well. I don't know that I should say loving being a father, but like not like, oh my God, life is over. This is like so antithetical to my identity kind of space. And to me, that's what I really love about Jemisin's style, and why I made the comment earlier of like, I can't wait to read the rest of the books, because I want to see more of that, more of where we're breaking out of the space where constructs that don't really serve us all that well are busted through in ways where it's, to your point, it's very messy, right? Like you have to reconcile the assault first with then the, okay, we are state directed to procreate in ways that Alabaster was familiar with, given their own personal life trajectory. And not at all, I don't at all think like complicit or condoning of, but like, I like your wording, like victim to a system that is like exploitative, but at the same time of the system being exploitative, kind of to the Alabama experience, that slavery was exploitative, but there were moments, and pretty stark moments, of joy and life being worth living, even in the context of those really horrendous conditions. And so I too love that Alabaster was a complex character who just helped me to think of where are the many places in our lives where we think like this is a binary or very limited, even if not binary, but a very limited choice of like options that can come out of this, and how Jemisin would be like, nope, we're going to go left here instead.
Yeah, she's so good at that. Just so good at that. I've heard her compared in some ways to Samuel Delaney. He's like another Black sci-fi author who I haven't read any of, but I would be interested in maybe going into some Samuel Delaney next, although I'm also really interested in continuing to read sci-fi by Black women. I do feel like that's in terms of the arc of history, staying in the current lane feels more equitable. Just like in terms of what we are putting into our psyche, our consciousness. And I've heard Samuel Delaney has stuff like where people change genders over the course of like hours in a book. And so then you have like these complicated like relationships. Because like if both people can change genders at will, or one of them can change at will and the other can't. Anyway, I just feel like there's a lot. There's a lot.
There is a lot, because like even in the context of this book, thinking about Alabaster and Cyanide and how their relationship develops over time kind of space, right? Like it's just, especially in the context of like world-ending scenarios where it seems like the main and only thing is about like procreation. That's the usefulness of your relationships, like being able to build relationships that are far more rich than just like literally being able to procreate and add value through adding more, I want to say people, but loosely using the term people, to a community to like survive. Like there's, yes, relationships I think are core to our survival. When you become super lonely, it's not going to work out so great for you. But to the point of living alone in the penthouse suite with penthouse vantage point without anybody ever coming through for you. But in that community space, there's something of inherent value beyond just can we or can't we create offspring together. And getting beyond that narrative, especially in all sorts of gender fluid ways, is really delicious.
There's this anime that I watched like a long time ago. It was called From the New World, and it very much reminds me of this book in the sense it's kind of like a society that's organized in this way, and like people with special abilities, and it also touches on that aspect of queer relationships as well.
From the New World.
From the
Sounds
New
really
World.
cool.
I loved it. It was really good.
That's awesome. I'm looking it up.
One other thing is you're
So
looking at that has come up and not at all to get off of the queer relationship space, only in the space that like the people who have said this are people who identify as queer, and I don't think it's unique to their experience, but it's something that has come up a lot for me this past week around how in the book people have tasks, so to speak, that becomes to define who they are. In much the same way, we'll walk up to people and be like, what do you do? Before we ask, like, who are you? Like, what do you do becomes who are you? And again, breaking out of the binary and the like, this like very black and white kind of approach to answering that question and looking at that question. I've had a couple of people say things like why that question makes them super uncomfortable and how limiting it is in terms of just like the very service-oriented, sometimes behind the scenes. So the two people who said it, one of them is the really wonderful Black woman who is catering our time here, and then one of our colleagues who functions as an executive assistant at our job. And both of them spoke to the what do you do in this space of like, well, I just do. And I was like, your just is like essential to like us being able to eat, us being able to like even get here. All these things that have gotten relegated to like, it's not as important as the quote unquote big work. It's not as important as being able to stop an earthquake, but like, I just do this thing. And again, kind of breaking out of those like very limiting paradigms around like, this is valuable work, this is not valuable work, this is men's work, this is women's work, this is the like all those kinds of things that kind of come up in the space of like who saves the world and who doesn't are one of the things I really love about reading sci-fi, particularly by Black women authors, is that they shake up a lot of those paradigms. Like both men and women and people who are beyond the binary are saving the world in this book. And that's something that I think can be subtle or unnoticed for people who aren't looking for it. To your point, Lawrence, you're like, I definitely saw Alabaster as queer. I think that there are people who can read this book and be like, oh, I never thought of that, because it's just not the lens they see the world through. And the same in that space of the so many of the things that we make fun of, that they just don't have the exposure and the experience to be able to say, like, oh, there might be a different, if not more advanced way of thinking about this, especially when we're trying to save the world.
Well, I have so many things I want to say in response to that, specifically the other two people who I was telling y'all about who were reading the book at the same time when we had debriefs. They like hadn't seen many of the things I had seen, and I was like, "What?" I was like, "I thought that was the whole book," and they were just seeing very different things.
They're like, "What? I haven't read any of that."
I was like, "So interesting," but we are coming up on at least our agreed upon time to talk about this book, and I have to pee and also eat dinner because it's 8:30 on this side. Oh, right, and it's your Alabama time. So we should close. We have closed these calls previously with something like, what are you looking forward to in the next book? But some of us have read the next book. It's only a little shade. It's like light shade because you didn't know about this club, Mustafa.
No, my bad.
Blame. No blame. You couldn't have time travel to know this was going to happen. So maybe say one thing. I guess you can check out however you want. I think I'm going to check out with a question I have about a future book. But Mustafa, you should do whatever you want. Also, you burned it. And I'll just go real quick because my question is obviously like, what the fuck is happening with the Stone Eaters? Like, who are they? Where are they from? Why are they important to this plot? And what is their role in the world, like in this world that Jameson has built? And I will pass to Mustafa.
So we were just a question that comes up for us?
A question or a thought. It can be whatever, really whatever you want. Just something closing.
I mean, for me, a thought would be, when will this series be turned into something for television? Because I really feel like this story lends itself so well to being told through the medium of television. And I'm just, what director would be chosen and, what interesting directions would they be able to take it in?
For sure. I would say I'm always stuck in this space of like, I want to add something different, but like, Lawrence, your question is my question too. I'm like, okay, I need to know, like, I always want to know like the origin, right? Like why are we in this situation of like, what do we do so wrong? Not like there ain't many different things, but like, what triggered this? And exactly, what's up with Stone Eaters? And like, can I get a whole book on them?
Well, I'm going to start reading book number 2 tonight. I don't know about you, Brenda. I guess you're traveling, so you probably don't have it with you.
Yeah, I didn't even think to bring it with me. I should have.
Cool. Well, I'm looking forward to talking with y'all for the next book. Mustafa, obviously, you're welcome to talk about the next book with us. It sounds like you said you're going to reread it.
Yeah, I'm going to reread it.
Great. So I would love you to be a part of the club.
Thank you.
And yeah, we'll figure out scheduling probably digitally once Reed is back, so we can include Reed in it.
For sure.
And I'll send y'all the link to the video when it's uploaded.
Cool. And Mustafa,
cool.
generally, it's probably 6 to 8 weeks in between our book conversation. So there's probably no like significant rush to like get the second book read, but people also get immersed in the books and just read them all because I guess that's the thing. But our schedules usually get us to the space of like pacing them about 6 weeks apart. So you just have a context for how much time you have to get that second one back reread.
Cool. I mean, thank you. I take my time with books, so this is perfect.
Nice. Great. Cool.
All right. Bye,
All right,
everyone.
well, bye, y'all.
Okay, bye. Bye. Nice meeting you. Bye.
Good to meet you.